Even if you're watching this video after November of 2024, the council right to buy discount or the right to acquire discount could be life changing. It could be generational change and wealth building for you and your family. I'm going to explain what the council right to buy is, what the council right to acquire is. I'll talk you through the mortgage process. And as always, I'll give you some really valuable advice. Make sure you watch the whole way through because that £16,000 that I'm talking about in the slide is not for everybody. Okay, so we're going to kick off. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I've been in finance for over 30 years, and I like to make these videos to share information and make sure that you can make an informed choice when you're looking to get a mortgage. The council right to buy discount or the council right to acquire discount was changed in November of 2024. I did more mortgage applications for right to buy in October, November than I probably did the prior 6 months. And this is because the government changed the maximum discount available. So whilst it's not as lucrative as it previously was, it's still free money. It's the council helping you get on the property ladder. So you should definitely look into it. A lot of people are surprised because they don't think that they could afford it because they don't have enough for a deposit. But in many cases, you can use the discount as your deposit. I've seen people be able to buy their council property with very little money out of their pocket because they used the discount as the deposit. Now, there are other fees that you're going to need to pay, which we will go through. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this video. There's great information, not only in this video, but in other videos that I make. So, can you buy your council property? The things that you're going to need to think about are how long have you lived there? Who else is on the tenancy agreement? And how much do you need? So, the right to buy discount, the amount that you get is going to be dependent on how long you've lived in the property. So, the longer you've lived in the property, the more of a discount that you'll get. And it is capped at a certain amount, which I'll cover off at the end of the video. But you shouldn't let the numbers at this point prevent you from starting the process. One of the things that you do want to consider and keep in mind is who else is on the tenancy agreement, because whoever is on the council right to buy letter when you actually start the process, they'll also need to be on the mortgage. So just be mindful, and I'm going to share some really good tips on how to maximize the ability to get a mortgage at a great rate that suits your needs. And how much do you need? That's going to depend on your deposit amount, which is going to depend on how much you've saved, how much of a discount that you get. But the long and short of it is, even if you don't think that this is something for you, you should explore it, because by knowing, you may be surprised and you may realize that you can actually buy your council property. So, right to buy versus right to acquire. They're somewhat similar, but there are some nuances. So let's just go through what the differences are. The main difference between right to buy and right to acquire is the type of landlord and the discount offered. The right to buy tends to have much larger discounts. Right to buy applies to tenants of local authorities. Right to acquire is for certain housing associations. Right to buy offers, as I said, higher discounts, while right to acquire discounts are generally lower and they're fixed and may not vary based on the time of tenancy. So if you have a right to acquire offer, you may find that as long as you get over a certain threshold of being there for a certain amount of time, that the discount is kind of crystallized. But it's great to look into, make sure that you start the process now. Don't wait until you think you are ready, as I always say. So what's the process? Let's just go through the process. This is important because as you go through the process, things can slow the process down, and you want to understand what you need to have ready in order to start purchasing your council property. So the first step is you're going to need to fill out an application with your local council or landlord, fill out an application to request to buy the property. So if it's a right to buy property, that's called an RTB1. The landlord then has a limited time, 4 or 8 weeks, if they've been the landlord for less than 3 years, to either accept or reject the application. If rejected, the landlord must provide a reason. You may be able to appeal if that reason you don't feel is valid. If the application is accepted, the landlord will arrange for evaluation of the property to determine its market value. This is not the point at which you should first engage with a mortgage broker. When you're considering this, you should probably reach out to me or a trusted mortgage broker and just say, look, I'm planning on pursuing a right to buy. They will then ask you some questions. So if you're talking to me, what I would do is I'd ask you about your employment. If you do have a deposit, I'd ask you what you think the property is worth, as well as what you think they will offer you as far as the discount. And we'll be able to determine that, the discount, we'll be able to determine it by how long you've been there. A few things to keep in mind. Have you kept your rent up to date? Are you a good tenant? Are you someone that they would actually want to sell to? So the beginning of the process is not set in stone as far as you definitely wanting to proceed, but you should always explore it. And by speaking to a mortgage broker at the very beginning of the process, they'll be able to guide you on a few things that you may need to tidy up before you're ready to submit your formal application. That's why it's important that you do it, even if you don't think you're ready, that you can have the right information. The next stage is the landlord will then issue a formal offer notice. It's outlining the purchase price, taking into account any applicable discounts. You want to make sure you maximize your discount, service charges, and other terms of sale. The tenant has a period of about 12 weeks from the offer notice to accept or decline the offer. If the tenant accepts the offer, they'll need to secure a mortgage and arrange for a solicitor. The conveyancing of the process is next. So the legal process of transferring ownership is then handled between the tenant solicitor and the landlord's legal team. So this is the point where you'd have the RTB1 letter. You would then go to the mortgage broker again, who's familiar with you because you've already spoken to them. And the mortgage broker will then be able to start putting the details together because we now know what the approximate value is. We also know how much you have towards the deposit, if anything, because as I said, you can use the discount towards the deposit in many cases. We'll also at that point give you some options on what solicitor or law firm to work with. This way you're all teed up to move to the next stage. So what's going to happen from here, we're going to get you an agreement in principle. And I do need to note and stress to you that the council will require a full mortgage offer in order to really proceed to the next stages. So an agreement in principle will not suffice as far as meeting some of the deadlines. I've seen clients, because they delay and take a long time with the process, I've seen clients almost miss the deadline. Some councils are quite, liberal. Others are quite pedantic. So don't delay. So don't have the council waiting on you to get your offer. Okay. So make sure you reach out to the mortgage broker. If it's someone like me, I work really fast, as I always say. So I'll make sure that your agreement in principle is done. Once we go through the illustration, so the numbers, the interest rate, the term, the monthly payments, and find the right product for you based on your circumstances, we'll then proceed to the full mortgage application. This is the point where the lender will do the valuation. And I've got lots of videos on the outcomes of valuations, but speaking just kind of generally, it can come out as one of three things. It can come out at the value that is being offered by the council. That's great. It can come out that the lender actually thinks it's worth more. That's okay. Where you'll have an issue is if the lender thinks that the property is worth less than the amount that the council's offering it for. But make sure you just check the video link, because I do have other videos about valuation. So once that valuation comes back, that's when the full mortgage application can be underwritten. And that's really when you're moving into the stage of getting the full mortgage offer. That's what you need, because remember, an agreement in principle is not a binding contract or a binding agreement. It's just saying, based on what you've told us when you keyed in this application, we would lend you this amount. So it's always good to make sure that you work with a broker like me, who does all of the due diligence up front, that the agreement in principle can convert into a full mortgage offer, which is actually what you need. Timelines, I talk about this constantly. Give it about 4 to 6 months. So it's going to take about 4 to 6 months from the moment that the offer is made for you to not get your keys, because you already live there, but for you to own the property and start making your mortgage payments. The reason why I say 4 to 6 months is because some councils are extremely slow, others are quicker. Some clients, like, I'm filming this during summer, people are going on vacation, so it may take a little bit longer. And the process is always as fast as the slowest person. I will never be the slowest person in the transaction. So make sure you're prepared, and we'll go through some of the things that you can do to prepare to buy your council right to buy property, either as a council right to buy or a right to acquire. My top tip: if possible, add eligible children to the application. This is about wealth building. I'll give you a scenario that is a true scenario, what actually happened. I had a client many years ago who approached me about the right to buy. She didn't have enough of a salary to be able to qualify for the mortgage. And this was in the days where in the city of London, you're getting 136,500 as a discount. But the property was priced quite high because it's London, and she didn't have the income to cover it. She had 2 daughters that live in the home that she could have put on the application. Both of them were working, both of them lived there. The block was that the kids were like, no, I don't want to lose my first time buyer's discount. I hear this all the time. If you're a young person and you're saying that, let me just give you a suggestion. If you haven't already started saving for your first home, and you're not that disciplined, and you're living at home at the moment anyway, you should consider going on the right to buy application. And here's why. Let's just say you go on the application and you talk to your parents or parent or whoever else is on there, and you make an arrangement around what can be done with some of the equity. What I mean by that is, when you buy the property, the council is going to give you some money. That money then becomes equity. I have a lot of videos about explaining equity, etc. So that means that's money that the house is valued one price, but you only owe another amount. That's the amount that you owe on the mortgage. Anyway, there's a period of time that if you do sell the council property, you'll have to pay back some money. But in most cases, for most young people, it's not going to take 1 or 2 years for them to save up for a deposit for a home anyway. It's going to take 4, 5, 6 years, right? So if outside of that period where you'd have to pay back some money for the right to buy discount, that property has quite a bit of equity. So that means what you think you would be losing on the first time buyer's stamp duty discount, which sometimes you're not going to get anything anyway because the house price you're buying is below the threshold. But let's just say you do. You could have already had an arrangement to say, we'll take some of the equity out of the property that we now own, and we'll use that to offset or pay the stamp duty. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. But quite often, we have this idea that money's going to fall out of the sky in the next 8 months and I'm going to buy a house, and it doesn't happen. So in the scenario I was telling you about, this lady approached me many years ago, the kids didn't want to do it because they're going to buy their first home. Then when November of 2024 came around, she's frantic saying, oh, I don't want to lose this £136,000. Can we move forward? The kids still hadn't purchased their first home and still didn't even have any savings. They could have been 3 years into that discount by then. So my advice would be, if you have someone else that's eligible and it fits your circumstances, please include them on the application, because it will increase your affordability as far as being approved for the mortgage. And with that said, even if you don't think you're ready, you should look into the process. And here's why. I've had so many people who have watched my videos or seen me speak at events and said, you know what, I'm going to just give it a try. A couple months later, they'll contact me and say, I have my right to buy letter. This is how much the discount is. We've done the math and we've seen that they can purchase that property, even though they didn't think they could, with very little money out of their pocket. The other thing to consider is that in November of 2024, things change. Who's to say that the right to buy discount will always be around? And then we'll have another scramble when the government announces that changes are being made. There's a saying in property that the best time to buy was 20 years ago. The next best time to buy is today. And if your circumstances are correct and you're in a position where you feel that you could purchase, you should look into it. You should speak to a professional. My videos are not here to replace professional advice. They are here to open your mind to some concepts that you can reach out to a mortgage broker or an accountant or a professional, a licensed professional, who can walk you through based on your personal circumstances. This is why I always ask you to like, share, and subscribe, because you may know someone that this information would help.